Oh, hey there! I'm Sebastien. I make video about web standard, web development, and Deno. I usually make those video about Deno where I will review the highlight of a release, but this month I kind of ran out of time, so I decided, well, might as well make it a stream. So last week I made my first stream, and it was about web component. I wanted to do it again this week, but I also thought, well, might as well do a Deno review just before. So all of you, I hope that you're going to enjoy this. If you have any question, there's the chat, don't hesitate to write. And again, I'm going through what I believe is either the most accessible features or the highlights in my opinion. So if I'm missing a feature that you care about, I'm sorry. All right, so here I just navigated to the release note, and so we can see an overview. I'm going to jump right now to this section here. So there was a lot of changes made to the REPL to support both TypeScript and also auto-completion and imports. So if I bring up my terminal here and we confirm that I'm running the latest version of Deno here, and if I were to, let's say, go open the REPL, and I were to try to type in some TypeScript here, well, where I'm going to type my argument x and y and the return value, and then I'll say, well, I'm simply going to add x and y together. You know, usually this would fail because the REPL was only handling JavaScript, and then if you were to find this function on the internet and copy paste it here, it would return an error, but here it's very happy to deal with it. Now, I guess it's important to mention that the REPL cannot compile the JavaScript, so it's not going to type check at runtime. It's only going to allow you to, find code on the internet, paste it there, see that it works, things like that. But it's not going to react the same way as if you were to compile your code, your TypeScript code to JavaScript. So that's for this one. I think it's going to help a lot. I see a lot of comments about it, people saying like, oh, I tried to copy this there and there was an error. So hopefully this is going to be an improvement for everyone. The other thing that is kind of in the same vein, if you try to import something in the REPL, it would usually also throw an error. So if I were to kind of go here on, oops, sorry, not on the blog, but okay, it decides to go to the standard library, go to, let's say testing and assert, and I copy this link. And usually I would be able to import from this link, but not in the REPL. The only thing I was able to do in the REPL was to use the top level await and use the import function and say, okay, well, I can import from this and assign it to a variable, for example, like this. So that would do the trick for most of the cases. But again, if you were to find code on the internet that you've wanted to paste in there, or just even like take a file, pipe it to the REPL, then it would fail. So for this reason, the team implemented import the same way as you would have it in your code here, like this. So now you can say import, then the functions you want to import, and then the URL, and this will work exactly the same way. So both of these improvement, I think, are, kind of utilities. Are not going to change, like, they're not going to like transform how you're going to use the REPL, but it's a very nice little convenience. And in the same direction there, there's also auto-completion within the REPL. So for example, you're like read, and I do tab, then I will have a few options here that I can choose from. and do the same thing. For example, here I'll do a read file, and then I get, do you want read file sync. So all of this is very good, especially if you're starting with Deno, you want to do a bit of code discovery, or even to make yourself a lot more, well, allow you to type faster when you're working with the REPL. So that's the first one. For the second one here, I think I wanted to talk about the state of crypto. So in my last video, I've mentioned, well, on the last video about the highlights, sorry, I've mentioned that there's a plan to be, that there will be a lot of improvement on crypto on 1.12 and 1.13. And sure enough, a lot of things came with 1.12, essentially allow you to generate keys, allow you to sign them, and allow you to verify them. So that's already a lot of things that we can do now to kind of, for example, if you have a password and you want to hash the password, and then essentially, you know, when the user is logging in, you would want to check their, whatever they type as their password, hash it, and verify the two hash together. You know, that's the most secure way of checking for password. So in this case, we have almost all the features that we need. The one thing I know is that we're still missing two functions, import key and export key, which kind of prevent from persisting the keys that we generated here. So in this case, it means that we'll have to wait a little bit longer for this. I think it will be in 1.13. I think I read that the actually the PR was already there. So this is coming very quickly. Very excited for this. Again, if I didn't mention it before, CryptoSubtle is the web API standard way of hashing and decrypting strings and content, sorry. In the same vein, we also have in the REPL, you can see here, I have access to random UUID. So it's a function that you can use to create random UUID. So very convenient when you're dealing with data, or you want to create a quick session or a cache session or something like this. You can just generate a UID like this. I think it's going to be a standard. I know it was pushed by Google. It's available in Canary. It's available, I think, also in Node and in Deno. Not available in all browsers yet, so be careful that if you're using random UUID in your code, that it's only target is not, you know, Safari or normal Chrome or Firefox, because this is not gonna work, as far as I know. And in the same vein, Deno 1.12 includes V8 9.2, V8 being the engine that runs the JavaScript, which means that we also have access to a new method to arrays, which is the @ method. So for example, I create an array here, so 24 and 12, and there we go. And I can say @ which is essentially the same as the square bracket, which means it's going to get the value at the index, for example, 1. This also works with typed array and strings the same way as you would expect it. Now, one thing that's interesting about this one is that you can also input negative numbers, so going from the end instead. So -1 is 12 and -2 is 24 again. I think this API was added especially for typed array to be able to access a specific value, but then it was introduced with like arrays and strings also. So that's all for V8 9.2. There are the things, but they are a bit more, you know, over my head. Yeah. So the next thing I wrote down is there's also some deprecations. Let's see here. It's mentioned here as a deprecation of copy. So I know that a lot of methods on the Deno namespace are going to be moved to STD, and all that's going to be left to STD, to the Deno namespace, sorry, is the method that has to do to, well, that act on direct IO. So there'll be read and write and close, but read all, write all, and copy, for example, are moved to STD. So here we're going to deprecate copy. And so if you need it, again, just go to IO utils and you'll have it there. The next thing that caught my eye on this release was the new shuffle feature on the test runner. So this is the kind of feature I think that might look like nothing. When you see it, you're like, I don't know why I would want to see this, want to have this, because obviously what it is going to do is to shuffle all your tests when you're running your test suite. And so the reason it exists is because it's going to ensure that all of your tests are resilient, independent, and deterministic. So I move here to a repository where I have a bunch of tests, and I'm just going to run them one to show you, whoops, here. And you'll see it's going to run all my tests and everything is fine. But here I have no ways to know if my tests are working because they're in the right order, or if they're working because, they're meant to work independently. And why this is important essentially is because if, let's say, all your tests are running here, but now you decide that you're going to filter down your tests to one subset, and like say, oh, I just want to test my integration test, or I just want to test parse request there. That's a better one. Well, if you do Deno test filter parse request, like this. So Deno test, we'll say the filter flag, and then parse request like this. I do need to authorize things apparently. Sorry. I don't want to allow all tests. Okay, 1 second. This is the magic of being live. Here, that's where the flag goes. And ideally, I would also say library. There you go. Okay, so I ran my tests and everything worked. But let's say one of them didn't work, and you test all of them together, it works. You test the filter one, it doesn't work. Now you don't know what's going on, right? And so that's where shuffle is going to help. If I were to run my tests with shuffle, it'll shuffle all the tests. So it means running them in different order than usual. And this will kind of help me figure out when I have tests that are interdependent. And so this is the kind of tool that I can use to make sure that my test suite is as resilient as it can be. So here I'm going to let it run a little bit, so make sure that there's no, it cleans up properly. And see here, you saw that it ran differently, starting with the integration test. Well, usually the integration tests are last. Also, download and uploads are kind of mixed up here. And if I run it again, they'll be in a different order. That's why you can also pass a seed. So a seed is a number that you can pass. It's going to ensure that the randomness is kind of not so random, so you can more or less control it a little bit better. So here I'm going to shuffle them using the seed 42. Yes. Sorry, I was reading the comments. So yeah, Grian says at can wrap around with the minus sign, exactly. So here I have my tests. They're almost complete. All right, and now you can see that it did stringify, find, and parse request. And so if I run again with the seed, we should expect them to be in the same order: stringify, find, parse, request. So this is a very good way to add randomness to your test without having too much randomness. So if you go through your current project, add the shuffle, and notice that some of your tests are now failing, it means that maybe they are not as resilient as you were hoping them to be. It's always good to have tests that can work on their own. Is going to improve your quality of life. Now, The next thing that I wanted to cover here, I don't know where. Look at me struggling with my... I name things differently. This is... Okay, it's there. No. There we go. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to discuss was the introduction of the WebSocket API. So I think we had WebSocket support through STD, but now we brought WebSocket to the main runtime, and the API is closer to the native API. Well, actually, I mean the standard API. And so before I get into it too deeply, I want to talk about the Deno serve HTTP method, because I never talked about it, so I think it's just a good occasion to mention it quickly. So serve HTTP is still an unstable API, but it allows us to deal with connection as HTTP without the use of the standard library. So in this case, in my example here, I have a async iterator over connection coming to the port 8080. And then I'll pass each connection to the serve HTTP method, which will create events for each HTTP request coming from that connection. And then event has a request object key here, which is a request that is similar to the web standard request object. So if you're ever curious, you can go on Mozilla, for example, MDN request, and search for the request object to see all of its properties and structure. So here I know that there'll be a method and I can test. So if the request method is get, I can respond with a new response, and that again, the response is from the web standard response constructor. So you can go on MDN, type response, and you'll get the response constructor here, and you can see how you can build yourself a response. So in this case, I just have a new response, and the body of the response, just a message, hello world. So if I were to open my terminal here, and so I do Deno run, I'll do allow all just for convenience, and type in my HTTP server here. I have my server running, and then in a second terminal, I could say, well, let's go for HTTP, curl HTTP, and localhost 8080, and I failed. What did I? Oh, okay. Need to read the error messages here. So as I said myself, and I forgot apparently, serve HTTP is a unstable API, so don't forget to put your unstable flag there. So let's run this again. No error this time. So let's try to do the request again, and this time for sure it works. Phew. As mentioned, the response constructor will take as the first argument the body of the response, but as a second argument, it will take an object for everything else that you might want to set. For example, I could say, well, the status code is going to be 404, for example. I can see here, I can see that the response constructor take a init object, which has a status text and more headers, right? So if I go here, restart my server, and then I'll run my command again with the -v flag this time to see more detail about the request, you'll see that I indeed get 404. So thumbs up on this one. Just need a little bit of water. 1 second. All right. So this brings me to my WebSocket example. So as I've mentioned, WebSocket was introduced with 1.12. The API tries to follow as much as possible the web standard. The only difference here that you'll see is, well, obviously, we have our two iterator here as the example before this, where we're going to listen for any connection to the port 8080, and then we're going to start handling any HTTP request as events. And then I could say, for example, well, take the request, check the headers, and if it has a upgrade, well, actually, if it doesn't have an upgrade key assigned to WebSocket, we can respond with an error of saying, well, this server only handle WebSocket, and a status saying that the request wasn't good, right? So if all of this goes well, we can use the new method called update WebSocket. So we're going to give it the request that we got from the server HTTP, and this will give us back a WebSocket that we can handle the event on, and the response to return to the client to confirm that we're good, we can do WebSocket, no problem here. So going to kill my HTTP server here, and I'll bring my WebSocket server. And then I'll bring up a second window on the side, and I'll say I need Deno run allow all. And I wrote a quick client here, and I'll just present it to you very quickly before I execute it. So the WebSocket client is a new WebSocket that is initialized to my localhost 8080. Then I added an event listener saying that as soon as the connection is open, we'll send to the server, hello server. And each time that the server is going to reply to us as the client, we're going to log to our console, the message from the server is blah, 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 right? And same thing very quickly again on the server side, same thing with open. When we listen to a new connection from a client, we'll say that the connection was established, log this to the console. And each time we get a message from a client, we'll just log it to the console and reply with the current time. Okay? So here I have my server running, no problem. And here on my second terminal, I will run my client. And we have on one side, new connection established as expected. And the first message from our client, which is hello server. And on the other hand, we get the current date, so we can prove that everything works. So now, if you have any more questions about WebSocket past the upgrade WebSocket method offered by Deno, do not hesitate again to go on MDM WebSocket and check for the first entry, so you can check out the WebSocket constructor. So we have a good example here and a list of all the event, close, error, message, and open. It's pretty straightforward, pretty convenient, and easy to use. This API will work both on your client, a browser, or in Deno. So I think it's something that we can all enjoy. And that's pretty much what I have. It's now 1:54. I have another show that starts in 5 minutes where we're going to cover more about web component and maybe play with some SVG if that's interesting to you. If you want to go more in depth in this, into the release note, it's available on the Deno blog. It's always up to date, so go and look at this. And if you have any question, do not hesitate to write to me. I'm available usually on the Discord server on Deno, and I also have a Discord server for this channel. The links are available in the description, and I think that's all I have. So I hope you guys learned something, and I look forward to see you next time. Okay, bye now. Please don't go, that's another show. Oh, hey there! My name is Sébastien Filion. I make video every week about web development, web standard, and Deno. Welcome to the second stream of the day where I'm going to talk about web component and SVG probably. So if you were lucky enough to catch it last week, it was my birthday and I streamed for the first time. And during the stream, I wanted to work a little bit on a web component I was working on. And toward the end, it kind of lasted for 2 hours, a bit too long, and I was getting tired. I wasn't able to completely finish it. So on my downtime, I finished the work that I started last week. And this week, I thought that it would be nice to start a new one from scratch and see all the steps. So it'll be a little bit simpler, but hopefully will introduce you to web components and something that we can all learn from. Sure, here. So this is where I am now with the work I started last week. So during the stream last week, I presented to you this one here. It's a slider that we can set easily, click around, no problem. And you can see that it registered the position, and we can set it. We can set the input, move the slider, so it's bi-directional, right? And then we started working on this range one. So I wanted to be able to have a range slider. And in this case, I think I got confused. Well, math and things like that. I got tired. I wasn't able to kind of get it done. So now you can see that it's done. And I'll just go over the changes very, very quickly with you for those who were there. So the one biggest mistake that I made with this one, I'll just move here to this render function here that I wrote, is that I forgot my own advice, and which is keep your render function deterministic. So I was starting to kind of try to play with, if this element is the one that's click, do this, and then it was kind of just a mess. And then, like I said, I realized just keep it deterministic. If the value is this, you move the notch there, you have nothing else to do, and not the notch, but the thumb. And so here we have if the component is in range mode. So range mode is this one here. We're going to get all the elements from our component. So this is the thumb, which is kind of the clickable part here. The outer thumb, which is kind of the light opacity purple thing around, and the notch, which is the little line here, okay? So those are all the elements that I care about. And of course, in the case of the range one, I have a min notch and a max notch, a min thumb and a max thumb, etc., right? And so what I did is I created a function to calculate the position for both of them. Once I have my position, then on the next frame, I simply position them, right? So I wrote a function for each of them, which is going to position them where they're supposed to be. So there's two for the thumbs, one for the min, one for the max, and one for the track. Effectively, the track is this dark purple part here. Just looking at the comments, missed the first couple of minutes. What library are you using, or is there no library? Yes, there is no library. So we're building everything from scratch here. I'm reviewing some of the work we did on the last one, but then we'll start over with the new components so you can catch up with that, I think, without any problem. And so, yeah, very quickly, I do the exact same thing with the not range version. So not range. So I get all the elements are relevant, calculate their position, and then position them on the next animation frame. And so those functions are very, very simple and deterministic. It's just a little bit of math to decide exactly where they should be within the frame that we have. Okay? And so that's about the changes that I made to the component itself. The other thing you might notice if you were there is there's now a right column with a bunch of checks marked here. Those are tests that are going to run when I refresh the page. Here, all of those are on auto, and you saw that it ran tests on each of the components. So I make some assertions on, for example, if the thumb is positioned in the middle, if I, set the value to 50, is it going to be positioned in the middle, and so on and so forth. And I made another one here as an example. The play icon here is clickable. We can click it and run the test, do some assertions, and then resolve. So I thought this was a very convenient way of kind of making progress on the component without having to always be like, okay, does this still work? Does this still work? This, yes. Okay, can I move this? Yes, okay. And so on and so forth, right? So knowing all of this, now my goal, my idea is this. I'm going to create a new slot and we're going to create a new component. And this component is going to be a simple stepper, right? So we have a value, maybe 0, and then we can add to it plus, 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 and remove from it minus, 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 okay? Hopefully we're all on the same page here. It's very simple. So to get me started, here I'm just going to move to my index.html page, and here is all the code related to the slider. So I minimize all of this, we can ignore it. I'm just going to add a new section for the stepper, put my new title here, stepper, and then we'll do a new div just to structure things properly. Stepper, basic, there we go. And then I think I had the title, basic, and then I want my component goes here. Okay, so everything works, we're good. So web components, similar to maybe React components, can be called with a given name that will be used for its tag, right? So like the h3, that's the name of the tag, that's how we initialize it. And in this case, we'll say that I want my stepper to be called IY stepper. So here the IY part in the beginning is a namespace. I kind of want to avoid potential collision with other, stepper component or something like this. And in our case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set an attribute defining the default value to be 0, and I'll start from there. Here, because I just have a very basic HTML page, I don't have any fancy bundler or anything like this. I'll do like the previous example, download the scripts. So we'll call it stepper here. And I'll go and create this file right now. So stepper. Okay, no typo. All right. So I have this. I have my first component, and obviously right now nothing's going to happen. I didn't define the component. So that's where we're going to start. I need water. Sorry for this ASMR situation here. So again, because I don't have a bundler, I need a way to kind of define the body of the component while I can still rely on, HTML, etc. So the solution for this is to create a template. This is a situation for now. We can make improvement as we go, but right now, just to get through this, the template is the easier thing. So a template is an element on a HTML page that is not going to be shown to the user, and we can use it to kind of stuff with HTML that we'll use later. So when we need it, we're just going to go and fetch a template, clone its content, and then add it to our component. And let me just do a side-by-side comparison, I'll bring my slider to the side here. As I move forward with the new component. Okay. So I'll go to my stepper. That's my on the left is my CSS for my JavaScript for the stepper, and on the right is the JavaScript for the slider. And so the same way, I need to start with a new class, and I note that this is probably on the way. There we go. So we'll create a stepper that extends, and that's important, a HTML element. So we're saying, let's create a new HTML element, and then we'll call our constructor, call the super, make sure it's a proper HTML element, and I don't know how to spell constructor. So let's just spell it properly. Okay. Now the most important part in the constructor phase is this line here. So we're going to attach a shadow to our component. So if you don't know, a shadow is an element that is usually hidden from when you're using the when you're doing the dev tool, using it, usually won't see it, but it's kind of where all of the elements relevant to a component are usually hidden. So that's kind of it's kind of the part that we're injecting into our component, but that is not really relevant to the user. And that's also to differentiate between the user input kind of elements that you put within your two tags, and the elements that are only relevant to the component. So here, if I check the shadow content of our input, you can see that we have a div that's wrapping everything, and then a div that is the content editable. So that means that's the part that you can type content in. So you see here, if I change a value, I'll change a value here, and that little pseudo here is a, oops, did this scroll? Yes, is the spinner, right? Which is pretty much the same thing as a stepper we're trying to build, I guess. So that's the next step for our component. We're going to attach a shadow to our component, and we're going to put it in open mode, meaning that it can be open and accessed by other parties. And from there, what I also need to do is to initialize our state. So I'll just keep a value variable around, and I'm going to prefix it with the underscore. This is going to allow me to make the difference between the value key, which is very important in a minute, and the state value key, okay? Now, in our component, we have this method that we need to define called connected callback. So if you love to do React stuff, you probably know component did mount. So connected callback is very similar, and it's going to be called each time that our component has been connected to the DOM. And here are the steps that I did for the previous component that I'm going to repeat. And so I'm just going to explain them quickly. So first, I go in my page and I try to select the stepper template. So that's the template I created a bit earlier that I showed you. And I'm going to clone all of its content and put it in this variable here. Then I'll go from each element within the content variable and move them to the shadow root, okay? That's why I use a while loop here, not like a for loop or something like this, is because I'm moving the elements to the shadow root, so therefore they're not available anymore. So it's important here that you use while. The next thing I did here is I went and selected all of the elements within, well, that we just created within the shadow root so I can bind them later on. So obviously right now I have none, so I'll just go and add some. So the template I use is this one here. And for now, just to get us started, I'll just use a couple of buttons. So I'll use the button says plus, and I'll use a, well, actually we should give it a class name. So that'll be add, and then we'll use a span, and that'll be our value span. And then we'll use another button, not a button, sorry, which will be the remove button. Okay, so normally we should see our component here. No, we don't. Whoa, because I'm an idiot, that's why. So, okay, now we have our class. This is very good, but we have to tell our browser, well, this class is going to handle this component. And we do this with this little line here. So the first thing is just kind of check that custom elements exist in our browser so I don't throw errors for nothing. And then I'll define a new one called stepper, which you will use the stepper class. Okay, like this. So hopefully I have everything I need this time. So I do. So we can see our two buttons here, the +1, the -1, and I didn't put a value here, so the value span doesn't appear. We'll just put the 0 here, should be good. And we do have our span. So this kind of sets up the base of our components, and we can go from there to start building it. So what do we need for our stepper to work? Well, obviously we need to handle the click on each of the button, and accordingly we're just going to increase the value or decrease the value accordingly. In this case will be a stepper by 1. We can add new attributes later to make it more complex, but I think that's where we're going to start. So if I follow the template from the last component that I built, I know that I need to find the add button. But this shadow root, then I can query within the shadow root for the first button, let's say button that has the add class. I guess I'll just move this a little bit. There we go. And then we'll do the same thing for the remove button, shadow root, and then query selector, and then the button with the remove class. Finally, we know that we need the span. So let's just call this also, stick with me here, a span and value. There we go. So we have all the elements, and we can from there simply bind a click event on the buttons and the remove button. Here, before I did a little bit of wiring here where it's going to create a function. Here in that case I'll call handle add button, which refers to a function that's bound. And the reason for this is because it's going to make it a lot easier to remove all the events when I disconnect the component from the DOM. So if here I'm just going to say this refers to a function called handle add button bound to this, and I'll do the same thing here. Handle remove button. Those are not the best title. Well, it's fine for now. Handle remove button. I mean button click, right? Bound to this, and then just define the two functions for now. And handle remove button event. Okay, so we have our two functions here, and those are the ones that I'm going to bind to my elements. So I'm going to say add event listener on click. I'll call handle add button and do the same thing with the remove button and say add event listener click and remove button. There we go. So that should be easy enough. And just to prove that they are working, let's just log add and remove to our console. So refresh and ++++ add. You can see it in the bottom here, and -, remove. Okay, so it should be bound properly now. So if the add button is clicked, I want to increase my value and then call the render. And if the remove button is clicked, I want to decrease my value and call the render. Okay. In this case, I did not create a render function yet, so I could go and do this. So calling a function render has no intrinsic value. Just doing it because it makes sense for a lot of people. If you're coming from React or something like this, it probably makes sense to you. It could also be a function that is out of the scope of the class. That wouldn't be a problem, and it might even be a better solution. Just to avoid kind of requerying my elements each time that I need them, I'm also going to create a object in my state that is going to call interactive elements. And in this interactive elements variable, I'm going to stick my various relevant element. So that's the add button. Let's just do this quickly now. Remove button and span. Now, this, and here in the disconnect, I could go and get both of the bound button from this object and not forget to remove the events, because we could have weird kind of memory leak and side effects if we did forget. Now, never forget that when you're trying to remove an event listener from an element, you usually need to pass the function that was used to bound it in the first place. I think you can also not provide any argument as a second, well, no second argument, but I prefer to do it this way. I think it's safer. All right, so now I need a way to, each time I click one of the two buttons, I increase my internal state, and then I trigger a render. But I kind of want to create a life cycle for my button, right? I don't want like everyone to start calling the render function at whenever they want, okay? So the best solution for this is, you'll see it here on the right side. I have this function called attribute change callback. So this method is going to be called each time that a pre-selected attribute is changed. And so this is an opportunity for us to check the value that was passed and be like, okay, do I want this to trigger something or not, right? And so what I did previously in the slider, and what I'm going to do this time, is I'll create a getter and a setter on my value, which is going to update our internal state if required, but more importantly, is going to set the relevant attribute on my component, forcing the new render. So this will be a good flow, right? So, and makes it a lot easier to get started. So to do this, before I get started with this, I need to do something important. I need to tell my component which attributes need to be observed. And so we see here, we have this line here, static get observed attribute. And obviously in our case, we're only going to observe value. Okay, so only when the value is changed, I want to be notified. Okay. And then just to do things properly, I'm going to add my getter and setter for the value attribute, not attribute, property. And that's why I didn't want to call my value in my state value, because then I would create an infinite loop in there. I would max my stack very quickly. So when I try to get the value key from my component, I'll return whatever underscore value is. And each time I try to set the value, I'm going to make sure that the stepper is not disabled. That works. And then I will set the attribute value to whatever the value was. So that works for me. The other thing is I'll copy this here. So it says attribute change callback. The first parameter is the name, then the old value, then the new value. And in this case, I'm only going to make sure that was useful before, not so useful right now. I could make sure, for example, in there that I don't try to render negative values. So -1, -2, etc. But for now, I'll leave it at this. And then I'll do, if all is good, I'll set the new value to _value, which is my state value, as a number. Then I'll call my render function. And then in this case, I want to dispatch an event saying that the component was changed, which kind of makes sense. That's how most input components work. So this should make sense. So now I have a way to add. So I had an event listener on my add button. I have an event listener on my remove button. So in both cases, all I need to do now is to update the value accordingly whenever. Okay, let's just do it. So those two functions are our function that's supposed to add, add to the stepper, add a value, increase the value by 1. So what I'm going to do, if I'm going to set the value to plus equal the value, or no, to equal, I guess, this value underscore. Okay, like this, right? So I want to increase the value that I already have in my state and assign this as my new value, right? And I'm going to do the same thing with the remove option. So this underscore value. Okay. So in both cases, now we should be able to add to my state, add to my value state and remove from it. And I'm just going to log both value just to make sure that I'm all clear. This makes sense. And then because I set value, I trigger the setter. And because we don't have an attribute disable, I'll set the attributes to the new value, which will trigger the attribute change callback, which should call our render function. So I'll just add a log for this to make sure that it does. So refresh, and I click plus, and I say add 1, and click minus, add 0, and so this should work. And so obviously right now I'm not blocking from having less than 0 value. I could do this within my remove function. So I could say handle remove button if this value, well actually this underscore value, let's stick to this, is less or equal to 0, let's do nothing. Otherwise, we'll decrease the value. And so from there, all I have to do left in my render function is to update the value in my span. Actually, before I do this, I want to confirm that if I go to the element inspector and go to fetch, check the stepper here, its value is updated to what I expect it to be updated, right? So if I say plus, it goes to -2, plus, -1, plus 0, 1, etc., right? So that's good. Also, so that's good. Let's stop there. Right. So now I want to make sure that my render function is called. It is called. And so all I need to do is to find the span from all the elements I saved for later and set its text content to whatever this underscore value is. And that should be as far as the render function should go. So refresh. Yeah, okay. So the render function is called the first time. And it's probably too early. Yeah. So if there is no this, well, actually, even if there's no this, what did I do the first time? Yeah, I'll actually add this line here. So the line was, if the component does not have a parent element, just do nothing. That means it's not ready yet. This hasn't been connected to the DOM yet. Don't do anything. So refresh. Still get an error, but I should get over it for now. I'll need to look at this again. I obviously made a mistake. But we can see that I can increase and decrease the value without any problem, and it won't go under 0. So here we are most our way through, and it is actually 2:30, so it is halfway through. This deserves some water. All right. So here I did promise you some SVG, because obviously my button thing here is not looking amazing. I want to bring it more in line with the previous example I had, and eventually also probably bind it to our input, but let's do some SVG for now. So I'll go back to my index where I have my template. And in my template, I'll initialize the SVG, and I'll start just writing the components and see how we're progressing, and I'll kind of just rebind the buttons and everything after, okay? So the first thing that I need is a SVG. And here, I'll just copy the signature from this one I had before. Go very, very close to that. So first, the SVG tag, we call the namespace. Then, important here is the view box. So the view box is kind of, imagine you're creating a drawing zone in the air, and you're going to define what's the corner on the top left coordinates are, and what's the coordinate on the bottom right are. And those are technically absolute value, meaning that they're not pixels, they're not points, they're not percentage, they're just a unit. So as long as you're staying within that range, whatever you draw is going to stick there. And in my case, I know that I need, I'm going to make something that's more tall than long. So it'll be 48 by 134. And so I'm drawing a box that goes from 00 to 48, 134. And in there, obviously, I need a circle. So I'll go and check one of the circles I had here. Well, I'll grab those two for now. And if I just drop them here, those I think will be out of bound. Yes. Okay. So the first circle here, and now it's important to mention before we go further, actually, when you define shapes or lines in your SVG, you define them one by one, they also mean that they're going to be stacked on top of each other, right? So the first element that you're defining is going to be at the bottom of your illustration. So this ellipse here is it was my thumb outer. So the thumb outer was like, if I go here and I click, is the larger purple circle that kind of show that I'm clicking it, okay? So this one I will use. It will serve a very similar purpose, but I'll go back to it later. So before, I'll start with this circle here, and I want this circle to be 48 by 48. And so that means that the radius is half of this, right? So that should be 24 by 24. And you get to define the X and the Y. That's if you want more like an oblong shape or more circle shape. So both our radius is going to be 24 by 24. So a perfect 48 pixel wide circle. And I need to position it 8 pixels from the top plus 24 pixel down. So that's 24 plus 8, I think 32. So I think I'm just going to position it at 32, 32 if my brain is good. Let's see. Okay, well, kind of it. Now it's much bigger than what I wish for, obviously, and that's because, as I've mentioned, our SVG, the units that we define are not absolute units. So we do need to kind of define the exact size that it's going to take. And so, because this is within my template, what I'm going to do is create a style element within the template that's going to define its height and its width, the same way as I did it here for the slider. So within this template, so that means it comes with every component that I create for now. I create a style, and I'm going to define the special name that is colon host. And this represents the component itself. So none of its children, but a component itself. And I'm going to say, well, your width, for as far as I care right now, is going to be 48 pixel. And also want to give it a display box. So I'll make it inline block. That will be better. Right now, they don't really have a box size, so that can create weird behavior. So now my circle is a bit more closer to what I wanted. It's obviously getting out of bound. So let's see. So my I created a box the right size, and then I created my ellipse, and it was probably larger than expected. One thing is for sure is my radius should subtract the strokes. So I think that's something I need to consider. Also, obviously, it's way too big. So I need to fiddle with this. So, what about with this? So, here. So, where's my logic faltering? So my circle should start at 24 from the left. That I'm pretty certain because my shape is 48, halfway through is 24. Actually, that's where my logic is faltering. I said 24, that's not true. I said 32, sorry, that's not true. So that's 24. That should at least present it a bit better. Okay, that's much closer to what I want. Now, the other issue, and I think that's something that I did not write for myself, is that, well, A, the stroke of 2 pixel or 2 unit is part of, well, it's the stroke are outside of the shape. So if it's 2 pixel here, I need to remove 2 pixel here. That's more close. The other thing I think I'm doing wrong is that I need to remove the 8 pixel from the outer. That's where the 48 comes from, right? So the 48 is my main circle plus 8 pixels around for this outer shape. So that means I need to remove 16. So that's 22 minus 16. That makes it 6 of radius, which is a huge difference. It does not look right though. I don't think that's correct. What am I thinking? It's 8. Oh my god. Going from diameter to radius can be confusing. So the radius is 22 right now. I need to remove 8, not 16. So 22 minus 8, 14. Okay. So thanks for hanging out while I'm figuring mathematics. So here we have our first circle. Great. So that'll be our add circle. And then just for convenience, or, you know, having a sense of progress, I'm going to add the second one. And the second one has the same size. Well, should be 62 plus 16 down. 62 plus 16, I think. 78 down. So the y should be at 78 plus 24. 78 plus 24 is 102. So here we'll have our two buttons, and in the middle I'll have enough space to put our number. So that's where our spend is going to go. So I have those two, and I obviously need to fix up the outer thumbs. So my first outer thumb is going to go 24, 24, like the first one, and the radius should be 14 plus 8. 14 plus 8 is 22. Let's start with this and see where we are. Looks well centered. That looks pretty much accurate. So I'll need a second one of these, which is going to be at 102. So under the second one. There we go. So now we have all of these elements, and I know that I need, give me a second, I need to open a new browser because I want to add a text element, but I don't play with text very often, so I just wanted to check, making sure I knew how. So we need to add a text, position the X and the Y, and then put our text into it. Obviously, I need to know if the X and the Y is the starting point of the baseline. So that usual baseline is usually not exactly the bottom of the text, but you know, if you have A, B, C, the baseline is under A, B, C, but then G would go under, right? So that's where the baseline should go of my X and my Y, and then I will need to center it. So I do have to shift the text position horizontally from a previous text element that's not it. I will need a way to center that text, I think. I'm not sure how yet. So let's take it one thing at a time. We'll see where we end up. So between my two ellipses, I'll add my text, and I'll say for now that the X is at still 24. We'll center it for now. And the Y should be at, so 102 is, okay, so we go 48, then 62 divided by 2. So 48 plus 62 divided by 2. How much is this? 79. So it should be around 79. So put my 0 there, and okay, not exactly where I imagine it would land. It's kind of there. Okay. Something else. 79. So 48. I know I have 62 left. It probably does include, if the baseline and my font was like 16, let's say, that would need to be included. So let's try 79 minus 16. The 16 comes from, it is usually the baseline for text in a browser. So I'm assuming it might be the baseline for my SVG text also. And because I didn't install it yet, it's kind of like up in the air, right? It's a bit better. Yeah. We'll leave it there for now, and we'll make progress, and I'll come back to it later. Kind of try to figure out exactly where it is. Then I need maybe at least a plus sign and a minus sign. Those can be drawn as lines. So I'll just copy this notch thing that I had from before, and I will need a vertical line for the plus. Well, yes, a vertical line for the plus, which should start at, so if the center is 2022, I need it to be 22 plus 4, 26. And I need the X to finish 8 further, so that's 34. And the Y will be at 26, 26. That's not correct. We do have a line, but that's not where I think it should go. So if I check, so I started from the center of my circle, which is 24. I want to go 4 over, not 6, 2 over. What I look at another value, I think, here. So 28, and then 28 plus 8 is 36. So 28. Oh my god, that's so much worse. Should I minus 4? Yes, I should minus 4. What am I doing? So it's 20 and 28, then 20. No, 24, 22, 24. Okay. Wow, numbers. So I know I'll need another one like this. I'll need it for later, so I'll keep that one around. And now I need to cross my plus sign. So I'll do, I just need to swap them, right? Yeah, I just need to swap them. Last time I had so much confidence, it didn't go so well. But hopefully I'm correct this time. So that's a plus sign. Looks like a plus sign to me. And the Y one, we just need to drop to the center of the other ellipse. So that's my minus sign. I'll move under the ellipse. And I'll need to drop it at 102. 102 minus 4 is 198. Hopefully that makes sense. It's nowhere to be found. So the X is correct. The other circle was 100 and what do I mean 198? 98. Okay. Something. 102. It's a flat line. It's a flat line. I don't need to. Okay, so I started with my logic of removing 4 for the X. It's a flat line. I don't need to remove -2. Okay, we got it. Sorry, that was a struggle. So we have our 2 buttons. They both clickable. They can both become our clickables. And we have our span, which is now the text. So as we have all of the elements, I will at least rewire everything, and hopefully that'll be about it for converting this to SVG. So if we go here, our add button is the SVG circle that is clickable and has the add class. I just want to be very, very clear about this. And then the remove one is a circle, which is clickable. I added that class, and it has the remove class. And the span, which is not so much a span anymore, but we'll stick with the name for now, is the text that has a class value. Okay, so let's make sure we have those class. So smaller circle has the clickable and the add, and the larger circle, the minus circle, sorry, has the remove class and clickable, and the class text has the class of value 1L. Okay, hopefully that works. So click something new. Null is not an object. Evaluating add button, add event listener. Yo, it seems like it's not getting our elements properly. I called it, why? I called it circle, didn't I? Right? Yes. Ellipse. Ellipse. Yeah. There's a point where I made it in my head that the element was called circle and started using that, but it was never called circle. I don't know what I did. So we can see that it does work, and means that I can just remove my old buttons here. and we can use what I have to move forward. So plus, 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 minus, minus, minus. Now, obviously, some of our elements are kind of clickable, which kind of sometimes make our event not go through. And that's because I should add some CSS rule to say like, well, you know, the plus sign here, those shouldn't be clickable. The span here shouldn't be clickable. And I can do this with, well, first cleaning up my code a little. So ellipse, actually, the last time I did the inverse, I said all the ellipse and text and line are not clickable, while the ellipse with clickable will be clickable. So hopefully that should clean this up a little bit. So a little bit better. It does kind of want to select the text here. I need to check if there's a way to avoid this, but we're much, much, much closer to what we need to go. All right. So the next challenges are obviously get that text centered properly, and the purple glow thing kind of should just appear when I click, and at least when I click and not all the time. So I could at least say something like, and I should probably change the class name, but I don't know what to call it for now. So I'll just say thumb outer should not be visible, but when the host is active, should be visible. And here I'm not entirely sure. So let me review how I did it the last time. So I do have the hover, that's fine. And I have active. Okay, that is correct. So I'm correct with this. So what is visible is not the host itself, but the thumb outer here. So at least we get not exactly where I need it to go. I think it should just be the one I'm pressing that appears, but it's much closer. The other thing that the thumb outer should be is not that opaque. So let's move the opacity down to 0.5. So that's a little bit more in line with this one here. All right, so we're almost at the end of this episode, this stream, and I'm most of the way through. There's a few things I would, so as I've mentioned, there's a few things I still want to do with this component. The first one is obviously only one of the two should be highlighted at once. I think this is kind of weird. The text should be centered, and obviously as I increase the stepping, the numbers, the value, it'll get more and more offsetted. So I'm not exactly sure. I'm kind of sure that the text component, well, the text element, sorry, has this way to center it, but this will offset the baseline. So I'll have to look for this. I'll have to play with this. And then I want to add some features to it. For example, so we can step from other values than just one. I think it'd be nice if we could step from 5, 10, whatever. And then the other thing I know I would need is that the component should be able to appear from as a long component, as a narrow component or as a wide component where the buttons are side by side instead of being on top of each other, right? So I think I'm going to end today's here. I'm trying to see, usually about an hour, and the last time people were starting to drop. So I'm going to leave it here, and I'm going to hopefully start streaming, like I said, before, well, maybe I didn't say it. I'm going to start streaming on Thursdays and Fridays. During these streams, I will be speaking about web standard, web development in general, and Deno. Depending, I'm going to try to establish a schedule that is more consistent. So you'll start seeing a bit more consistency as I get used to this format. But at any rate, if you wish, you should, well, you should subscribe to the channel so you are notified when I announce a new stream. Another way to get on top of notification is to join the IY channel Discord server. There's a link in the description. You can join. As a perks, you're going to get a ton of emojis that are indeed very cute. So I think I'm going to wrap this up here. I really hope to see all of you next week, and where I'm going, in the meantime, make progress on this and show you what I've done, and then start a new project from there, improving on top of what we have. So leave me in the comment any question, feedback, or thing I should know about, what you think about this show, what you'd like to hear about, and obviously any technical question where I'll be very happy to answer if I can. So yeah, I think that'll be it for today. Okay, bye now.